I'd like to thank everyone for coming. This conference is being presented by Vermont Tenants Incorporated, a statewide tenant organization based here in Burlington, and Chittenden Community Action. And we've had a number of different organizations from around the state who have participated in putting this together with us, as well as contributing financially to getting this off the ground. And I think it's a great first start to bring together so many people who are concerned about housing and working on it from a lot of different levels. And with that, I would just like to introduce the Mayor of Burlington to speak with you briefly.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here and to welcome our friends from out of town as well as local Burlingtonians. If I seem a little bit depressed, I am, because I just came back from Washington. And actually, Ronald Reagan is the President of the United States. You've been reading this thing in the newspaper, and I have now confirmed it. He really is. And there are people in Washington who actually believe that what he proposes is right. This is astounding to me. I thought that the Free Press had been lying to us for months about Reagan. But it is true. In point of fact, I'm delighted to tell you what we have done in the area of housing in Burlington. And I think given the enormous constraints working against us, our Office of Community and Economic Development and other people associated in housing have come up with some very imaginative and dynamic programs, and we are making some significant successes. But on the other hand, I would not be telling you the truth if I thought that Burlington or any other community in the state of Vermont or the state itself was beginning to touch upon the problem. Burlington is not the only community in the state of Vermont that has a severe housing crisis. In point of fact, my guess would be that we need tens of thousands of units of low and moderate income housing being built in the state. We have construction workers ready to go to build it. We have forests ready to provide the wood. We have the technology to do it. The major thing that we lack is the capital to build that kind of housing. I mean, there are certain legitimate questions of how you go about doing it, but I'm quite confident that the people of Vermont can solve that problem. What we cannot solve at the moment, although we can talk about how we can do that, is to find the financing available to do what we all know has to be done. I do not, I believe, have to tell the people in this room what the President of the United States is doing with regard to federal aid to housing and federal aid to large numbers of other programs as well. Right now, in Washington, they are debating the President's budget proposals, which I have here. In case you haven't heard, let me tell you what they're contemplating. Reagan wants to destroy revenue sharing. Now, what revenue sharing will mean for the city of Burlington is the loss of $1 million, which will mean that we will have to raise property taxes and not be able to provide funding to many low-income groups and organizations and service organizations that desperately need it. He's talking about destroying community development block grants. Those are the money that enable our CEDO office to function. That is the money that is going into the housing rehabilitation program in the city of Burlington, which is rehabilitating dozens and dozens and dozens of units of housing. If you walk into Burlington's Old North End today, you will find that that community is in far better shape than it was 4 years ago. And the reason for that is that we have done a reasonably good job in pumping money into that community to rehab old housing. Much of the housing in Burlington is old, and it is our view, rather than tearing it down, we intend to rehab it, and we have done a pretty good job. The President proposes that we not have any more money to do that. In addition to that, you'll notice that all over America, and I'm sure you'll be discussing this issue today, there is very little new low-income housing being built. And the reason for that is they are stopping federal aid for low-income housing. They are stopping federal aid for Section 8. So the bottom line is that in terms of future housing programs, the situation regarding Washington is totally dismal. But it's not just dismal for housing. Don't feel that he's being prejudiced against you. He is destroying every program necessary for low-income people, for working people, for the elderly. You come back from Washington, and I was just there, and And you get the feeling that not only is he going to war against the people of Nicaragua, he is very clearly going to war against the people of America, especially the poor people and the working people. It is war. It is class warfare in a way that I have never seen in my 4 years in Maine. It is unbelievable. And the assumption is that the poor people, the people who need the housing, they're not going to vote anyhow. They're not going to be following what's going on. And anyhow, 2 weeks before an election, politicians can put in their 30-second television ads and get millions of dollars from their rich corporate sponsors and get the votes that they need. The bottom line is that you're in a political struggle, and it's not just housing, it's every other issue. It's whether people are going to sleep out on the streets, whether people are going to have enough food to eat, whether Social Security is going to be cut or stabilized. It's all of those issues. Here in Burlington, I'm proud of what we've done. We have, for example, put in 5 new members into the Burlington Housing Authority, all of whom are tenant advocates, and we're confident that they're going to do the right thing. We have recently passed a law prohibiting, I'm embarrassed to say it, that this is not all that terribly progressive, but we are probably leading the rest of the state in that in the city of Burlington now, there will not be ads in the newspapers telling mothers that they cannot apply for certain housing because landlords don't want children in their housing. That has been done away with. We have not yet succeeded, and we'll try again to do away with, or to limit what landlords can get for security deposits. We are moving in terms of tenant legislation. What we have done also is before we were in office, there was virtually unenforceable the housing health codes of the city. Landlords were not making the improvements that they needed. We have now gotten a very vigorous inspection system going. We are now negotiating with developers, very, very controversial. You see, many of these developers have gotten tremendous breaks from the President of the United States. What they would like to do is come in and build condos and expensive housing. And what we are saying to them, well, let's sit down at the table, and before you start building, let's talk about what you can do for low and moderate income people. What kind of impact you're going to have on our community. We would like you to build some housing for moderate income people, or perhaps for low income people. Let's talk about an entire package. You may not just come in and build housing for wealthy people. That's called inclusionary zoning. And this will be a subject of a lot of debate and discussion. So to conclude, I think we are doing, and I'm sure we're delighted to hear any ideas that other people might have. We have started the land trust concept, which I think is a new concept for a city, at least in the United States, to get involved in, where we're trying to at least keep a certain number of houses off the real estate speculative market, which will keep housing low, enable people to buy housing rather than have to rent it. We're making progress, and I'm sure that's an issue that Tim McKenzie and others will be discussing. So I think on a wide variety of fronts, we in Burlington are doing a good job, but we have to admit that we are not doing enough, that the county is not doing enough. It is not acceptable that there are towns in Chittenden County and in the state of Vermont who will not build low or moderate income housing. That is not acceptable. It is not acceptable for the state of Vermont to stop pumping in more money into the whole housing program. But once again, ultimately what we're dealing with is a political issue. And I think what all of our jobs are is to raise the demands as loudly as we can about what we want and put as much political pressure as we can on the people in Montpelier and on the people of Washington. I hope, by the way, that you will all be watching, and we will do our job to publicize how Vermont's 3 congressional delegates vote on Reagan's proposed cuts. Don't let them off the hook at all. Okay, now I think my job is to introduce Andrea Hill, and I am delighted to do that, and I want to thank those people who helped put together this conference. We need a lot of ideas. We need to bring people together to start turning the political trend in America. Welcome to Burlington.
Thank you very much. The mayor has done a lot of my a little bit of my presentation, but some things it doesn't hurt to hear again, and I will try to add some little insight to who voted why and how, kind of congressional gossip, so to speak. I'm with the National Low Income Housing Coalition in Washington, D.C., and we are a lobbying organization which lobbies Congress for low-income housing. It's been in existence for about 12 years now. And we're a membership organization, and before I go any further, let me say that we've brought lots of material that's over on the table, as well as membership lineups, and a very concise summary of just what the housing picture is in terms of the budget cuts that we've heard about.